welcome to the Artist Behind the Music Canadian Country Series. Today we have Baynton joining us from Ontario. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you and learn a little bit more about who you are as an artist, as a person, and what got you into music. I see you're sporting a Calgary shirt. I am from Calgary, so you're repping well.
I've got a lot of family and friends out in Calgary, so.
Excellent. Are you a fan of the Stampede?
I am a fan of the Stampede. I was hoping to get out to it last year, and of course that didn't quite happen. And I'm hoping that I can get out to it this year, but we'll see how things play out.
Me too. My fingers are crossed. They are selling tickets for the rodeo, so if you're looking for something to do in July, then you can buy your tickets now. This is not sponsored by the Calgary Stampede.
Yet. It's not sponsored yet.
That's right. That's awesome. Well, thanks again for joining me. I want to chat a little bit about what got you started into music, what was your inspiration, and kind of what triggered you to take the musical route in life.
Yeah, it was more something that just kind of started as something that I thought would be fun to do, is play the guitar. My brother actually wanted a guitar for Christmas when we were about 13, 14 years old. And my parents were smart and just got us one. And I think he picked it up for maybe a few days, a week, and never really played it after that. And I kind of took a liking to it and kept playing. And it kind of just got to a point where I couldn't play the guitar without wanting to sing at the same time. And that just led to songwriting and all that. But when I was a teenager and when I was a kid, I was heavy into sports. I literally played everything. I played hockey, football, rugby, baseball, you name it. And had I not broke my leg in 3 spots when I was 17, 18 playing football, I probably would have been in the States on a baseball scholarship. But I ended up having 4 major surgeries. I've got a metal rod holding my leg together because of that. And I was kind of in physio for a good year and a half or two. And in that time, the only thing I could really do was play the guitar and sing a lot more. And I'd been performing and stuff since I was 14, 15, but that was the time when I, started going out and playing the bar scene quite a bit and all that when I was in college and university and everything, and kind of got lucky enough that it took off. And it's been my only source of income for almost a decade now, which has been pretty amazing.
That is amazing. And isn't it funny how life works out, where you think you're on track to do something, and then all of a sudden something shifts or a trauma happens and it diverts your life to a path maybe you didn't anticipate, but that path is, it's really truly best for your authentic soul. And I find that so neat. When I was a kid, I was a competitive gymnast, and I was going to go to the Olympics. That was my goal. And I ended up breaking both my feet at the same time and tore stuff in my head, my hip, all sorts of craziness. But that's why I started music. So very similar kind of story. I haven't looked back.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny how, I've had enough things happen in my life that I know when it seems like everything's going wrong, it's usually because there's something else you're supposed to be doing as opposed to what it is you think you're supposed to be doing. So rather than getting frustrated and down on myself about, what should have happened, or, I got ripped off because of this or whatever, I kind of just take a step back and be like, okay, what am I missing and what am I supposed to be doing?
You know what? That's a great lesson to share, because often when we're in situations and things aren't working out, we can get overwhelmed and discouraged and feel, those little beliefs of not being good enough, or all those craziness that goes through the mind. So what you said just about stepping back and putting things into a new perspective, I think is such an important tool. Do you have any specific tools that you've used to remind yourself to step out of that and to step back to look at life?
I think as often as I can, I try and look at things from a neutral perspective. I think more often than not, we kind of get stuck in whatever moment we're in and looking at things only from one side of the coin. And of course, there's always 2 sides at a minimum to every single situation. And oftentimes, if you can try and take a step back and look at it from a neutral standpoint, you can kind of see more of the options that are available to you, but also a lot more of what your path is to move through that. And I think the more knowledge you have of a situation, the better decision you can make about how to handle that moving forward. So it's more just about not letting situations overwhelm you and taking a step back before you make your decisions to move forward.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Just looking at the picture instead of responding. I'm a big fan of, respond as opposed to react. And I think that helps make clearer choices and things that are more in line with what you should be doing as well. So well said.
Yeah.
Great stuff to share, because especially new artists coming into the industry, you know, it can be very overwhelming, and there are a lot of no's and there are a lot of discouraging moments where you just feel like, what am I even doing? So what kind of things have you experienced in life where it was like the doors kept closing and the no's kept flying, and what did you do to keep pushing forward and move through? I just assume that everybody's experienced that because it's
I,
like,
unfortunately, I think the industry is kind of set up to try and knock you down as much as possible. There's going to be a lot of no's and all that. And I think there's a lot of people who get into this industry because they want the fame or the fortune or whatever. And for me, I'm here because I love performing, I love writing, I love making music. And you learn really early on that there's no way you're ever going to appeal to everybody. I mean, look at the biggest artists in the world right now, whether it's Justin Bieber, Taylor Swift, any of those. They have legions of fans who absolutely love them, and then they have a ton of people who absolutely hate them.
yeah.
And you can't argue with the success they've had, the album sales that they've had, the tours that they've been able to put together. And you know, it's no different for anybody. If you're making music with the sole purpose of trying to make stuff that everybody's going to like, it's just going to fall flat. If you make stuff that you can relate to, that makes you go, oh my God, I'm super excited about this. I want to turn it up. I want to perform this all the time. There's going to be a demographic of people out there who they're on the same page as you. So for me, when I'm making music, a lot of people have always asked, you know, how do you write a country song? And I laugh because I don't think I've ever sat down with the intention of writing a country song. I sit down and write the best possible song that I can. It just happens that my voice is very country, and that is kind of what I lean towards anyways. But I feel like if you just try and make the best music possible and put it out there, you'll find the demographic of people who can resonate with that as well. And I feel it comes across as a lot more genuine.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting you say that you've never sat down to purposely try to write something specific. It's interesting in like in the industry, just writing when you want to write for radio, just say, or you want your song to go on radio for an artist. And they think, I've just seen so many people think, I have to make it sound exactly like A, B, and C for this to be successful. And then they're frustrated when maybe D, you know, it doesn't hit the charts, right? And
Yeah.
so important to really sing from here and write from here, because the world doesn't need what's already out there. The world needs something fresh and new and authentic.
Yeah, and I find especially in the Canadian music scene a lot of the bands get marketed as like, oh well, this is the Canadian version of Old Dominion, or this is the Canadian version of this artist. And to me, it's, you know, we already have those artists. You know, do something that's unique and your own. There are certain things that I keep in mind when I'm writing and getting ready to go to radio, and it's, you know, look at the length of the tracks that are usually being played.
Yeah.
And if you can write a song that kind of falls between 2 minutes and 45 seconds and 3 minutes and 15 seconds, it has a much better chance of getting added into a rotation than something that's like 4 minutes long. Not to say that a song that's 4 minutes long isn't incredible, but if you're trying to break into that market, you need to give radio something that they can easily fit into an existing rotation. And there's certain things like that.
Yeah.
But as far as, you know, how your music sounds sonically or lyrical content and stuff like that, I do believe that there's a lot of flexibility within the market, especially with, you know, pop and rock elements kind of blending into country. And there's a lot of people who say that, you know, it shouldn't be in country music and all that. But I mean, you can go back to the late 40s and there were these arguments being made about everything that was coming out. You know, the market isn't going to go backwards. It's going to keep evolving and moving forward. And, you know, I find a lot of people listen to what's on radio and go, oh, I want to make something that sounds like that.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you write the music, you get in the studio, you record the tracks, you're probably a year and a half away from that. So by the time it gets released, there's newer stuff out. So now your track sounds dated, that had you had that ready the day you decided to do that, maybe. But if you're constantly trying to record stuff that sounds like what's already out there, you're always going to be behind the trend. You just got to go in and record something that's going to make you excited and that you're going to be happy and proud with, and that represents you as best as possible. And I believe if you do that, that the fans will be there and radio will get behind it.
Yes, I love that advice as well. It's really important to just stay true to your sound, and sometimes it takes many tries to find your sound. I know I've released tons of stuff in the past where it's like, oh, that's not really who I am, but potentially that's maybe who I was then. But we're always evolving, so your sound can evolve with you too, right? And what are some kind of ways that you dive into discover like your sound and being okay with your sound and putting your country rock vibe out into the world without fear of judgment or expectations of other people?
I think the the fear of judgment part kind of goes away when you understand you're never going to please everybody.
Yeah.
There's going to be fans and stuff out there who just absolutely hate your music for no apparent reason. There's going to be people in the industry who don't see the value in what it is you're doing, and that's okay, because there's going to be people who absolutely love it and think it's amazing and all that. And that's what you need to focus on and not get discouraged if people out there don't like what you're doing, because there's always going to be people who don't like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
As for how I found my sound, the first album I put out back in 2012, we toured with for a number of, of years in the bar scene and festivals and all that stuff. And it was doing, 200 live shows a year for a number of years that you start gravitating towards certain play styles. And I realized that a lot of my influences came from, 90s rock and early 2000s rock and all of that stuff. So I actually sat down with a good friend of both of ours, Chard Morrison.
Yeah.
Him and I, he's a co-writer on this track that's going to radio, by the way.
Excellent. He just co-wrote Game On with me too.
I know, I saw all the promo for that. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. He's a great writer. Hi, Chard.
But we all have those songs that come on the radio or on our playlist and we're like, oh my God, I absolutely love this song. And what I did was Chard and I actually sat down. It was a night we were supposed to be writing together, but we decided to do this instead. And I went through all of those songs and I'm like, oh my God, this song is amazing. And I started writing down what in those songs did I really like. And in some cases it was, more rapid fire melodic verses, that there was a pre-chorus that kind of built up into a soaring chorus, that there was usually a breakdown chorus at the end, that the lead guitar parts were more melodic, and so on and so forth. And by the time we went through 12 or 14 songs, you start to see all these similarities and things that you really, really like, which then gave me more structure creatively when I was writing songs, that, okay, these are the things that I really like and I gravitate towards. So when I was in the writing process, it gave me a lot more direction of how I wanted to compose those songs and kind of gave me more structure with piecing everything together. When we went into the studio to record the current album that's out, I actually brought in, do you know Matthew Good? So his band came into the studio with me.
Nice.
Because I needed more of that rock element in the studio. And we actually kind of recorded all the rhythm parts and all of that stuff in the vocals first. And then we had a number of different instruments laid out. We had a banjo, we had a fiddle, we had a mandolin, we had a lap steel. And it was like we needed one element to pull it back to country a little bit. And at the end of the day, there was no room sonically for banjo or mandolin. That higher end frequency was already taken up with some of the guitar. Fiddle didn't really fit with much. And the only thing left that might work was lap steel. So we went back in the studio, we're like, either this works or we're putting out a rock album. And of course, we get in the studio and we did the first pass on lap steel. And I'm basically just sitting in the studio being like, yeah, this is the sound that's been stuck in my head for like 8 years. So that was kind of the recording process with that kind of shaped the sound of everything we were doing. We then ended up going down to Nashville to finish the last few tracks on the project, which ended up being the Rough Around the Edges album. So now we kind of have that as a bit of a template moving forward for the next album that we're going to be recording late February. It was supposed to be recorded early January and then late January, and because of COVID and all that stuff, it just keeps getting bumped. But I'm hoping to get in the studio as soon as possible.
That's exciting. I really love how you talked about listening to some of your favorite songs and what it is you love about those songs. And I think that's really great advice for any artist that's trying to find their sound and their writing style and find how can they make the best song possible for them. And that's what music is all about. It's inspiration and pulling from different sources and experiences and sounds to make to make your own original sound. So
Yeah.
really love that.
And I think the main thing to take away from that is none of the songs on that list were country songs that I was going through.
Yeah.
Because there are elements from country tracks and stuff that I really, really like, but the songs that we went through weren't country songs. So, I mean, if there's an artist out there who's a huge fan of R&B or blues or whatever, there's elements from that can be pulled into your own music in some creative way that probably hasn't either been done or thought of or played around with, that, you know, might end up having a really cool effect to it.
Totally. No, I love it. Get creative. Like, I'm a big fan of pop music, so I'm on the other realm. I love pop, but I sing country. Like, and it just works together. I like beats and dancing and, you know, and just make it work for you.
Yep.
Make it work for you. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I would love to hear you play if you're ready to share some tunes with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, kind of going with what we were talking about earlier about different situations and all of that leading to stuff. There's a song I wrote almost a year ago to the day. I was down in Nashville last year, and I had a song idea written down, and the line was, "If I knew now what I thought I knew then." Because you look back at any point in your life, even where we're at now, most of us are under the mindset that we've got stuff figured out. We know what we're doing, where we want to go and all that. But of course, you look back 5 years at what you were doing and playing around with, and you knew nothing. But if we knew now what we thought we knew then, if we actually knew everything, you know, would it be different? And this is a song that's going to be on the record that should have been recorded by now, but isn't recorded.
And that's
it's called If I Knew Now. Looking back, man, I'm tanking gas and going fast. There was nothing better. My first truck would never rust, and my first love would last forever. Now that I've been through it all, life was easier back when I knew it all. If I knew now what I thought I knew then, with no heartache like the back of my hand, have a little more money and a lot more sense. If I knew now what I thought I knew then. Yep. Really thought that grandpas and good dogs wouldn't get any older. Good times led to late nights, and the sunrise didn't hit you with a hangover. But now that I've been through it all, life was easier back when I knew it all. If I knew now what I thought I knew then, with no heartache like the back of my hand, have a little more money and a lot more sense. If I knew now what I thought I knew then, if I knew now what I thought I knew then. Yep. The more you live, the less you know. So when you think you've got it figured out, you don't. So if I knew now, if I knew now, if I knew now, if I knew now, if I knew now what I thought I knew then, with no heartache like the back of my hand, have a little more money and a lot more sense. If I knew now what I thought I knew then, I'd be wild and reckless all over again. If I knew now what I thought I knew then, if I knew now what I thought I knew then. Yep.
Great song.
Thank you very much.
I love that. I was just ready to sing along. It's very sing-alongable. It's easy to remember the words, and it just makes you want to dance. And I think that's a topic that everybody can relate to in some form or another, no matter what stage of life they're at. You know, kind of made me think about last year at this time, in no way, if you told me that the world was shutting down, I would be like, you're nuts. That's not gonna happen.
Tourist or whatever.
Yeah, like that is not gonna happen. So here
Yep.
we are. I would have done maybe things differently to prepare for it.
Well, especially in this industry, you know, and for me especially, I'm used to doing 150 to 200 shows a year. So
Yeah.
going from being on the road 8 to 10 months out of the year to, you know, more or less being stuck at home and all that. And it, you know, it's definitely been nice to have the downtime to relax and unwind and all that stuff. But I mean, I miss getting out and performing.
Yeah. What would you say your biggest takeaway from 2020 was?
You know, I think most of us, especially in this industry, and I'm sure a lot of other industries as well, you get so caught up in the I always have to be moving forward and doing something and all of that. And I remember being in the mindset that, you know, I'd be so busy and I'd be like, man, I wish I just had like 2 days off. And then like 6 hours into your first day off, you're like, I'm so bored. I wish I had something to do. And you're constantly in that almost agitated
Yep.
an anxious state where you feel like, okay, I have time to rest, but then in the back of your mind, you're like, but I never have time to rest. There has to be something that I'm supposed to be doing.
Totally.
And then when this all first started back in March, I had actually just got home from a West Coast radio tour. So I had just been out in Calgary for like 2-3 weeks, toured all over Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, just got home and the whole world shut down. And at first it was like, this is going to be 2 weeks. And I, you know, kind of held out that. And it was always, you know, is anything going to get back to normal? When I finally just accepted the fact that, okay, this year is a write-off, it was only then that I started kind of relaxing and taking more time to myself to do a bunch of stuff. And I think the big challenge for a lot of us going into this year and when, you know, when everything's actually get back to normal is finding a balance between what our lives were like before all this happened and what our lives are like currently. Because I think how things were before, it was way too fast paced, way too hectic. You know, people were mentally burnt out and stressed and all of that stuff. And then you have the other side of the coin where we have all this free time to relax and unwind and everything, but we feel like we're not being productive with what we're doing. And I think that there's a balance between the two where you're not go all the time and you actually take the time to do stuff for yourself and relax and unwind and all that. And I think that's going to be the challenge because when things do get back to normal, especially for the music industry, we're all going to want to jump in with both feet and go because we've been waiting for so long, but it's going to be finding that balance when we get the opportunity to do it.
Absolutely. It's going to definitely be about finding balance because you're right. Moving at that pace is not healthy and it's not good for your, you know, emotional, your physical state, your mental state, all of those things. It's just to be in that state of mind where you can't even slow down to relax. And I'm a huge victim of that as well. It's not really until like this month that I actually feel like, oh, it's Friday, I can relax. And now I'm like, I'm going to watch movies and play games and we're going to just have nice dinners and go on walks. And it's just a very interesting feeling to not have any guilt attached to recharging and relaxing, instead be motivated to relax. And it's a very interesting swap. So
yeah,
we need to take that in mind and like keep that in life because that's how we're going to do better and be better as artists.
Yeah, and you know, for me, like the last few weeks with the new single going out and all this stuff for that, it's like I actually had some work that I needed to do. So it was like, oh my God, like how do I do this again? I haven't done this in so long. But it's been nice to kind of get back in the swing of things with that. But I'm really hopeful that at some point this year we can get back on the road and start doing some live shows, even if it's more stripped down acoustic stuff, just to slowly start getting back to that again.
Slow and steady. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's hear another song. Speaking of live music.
Well, speaking of the writing process and going back to Chard again,
Yeah.
I met Chard at the Edmonton CCMAs. I want to say it was like 2013 or 14, something like that.
Is that right?
And I was staying with family in Calgary at the time. So when I got back to Calgary, Chard being a Calgary resident, I ended up going over to his place and we started writing together. And when I got back home to Ontario, I wanted to continue writing with him. I had never written over Skype or anything like that at that time, because back then it was, you know, kind of when that stuff was just starting.
Yeah.
So back then we started writing every single Tuesday night, and to this day we still write every single Tuesday night, except when he's doing Songsmiths out in Calgary. But the first time we ever got together to write over Skype, it was, 30, 40 minutes of catching up, hey man, how's it going and all that. And it was like an hour and a half of neither of us had any ideas, like didn't have a clue. And just to like break the silence and the monotony, Chard made the joke, have you heard the one about the preacher that walked into the bar? And we kind of laughed a little bit and went back to whatever. And I started playing around the guitar and finally stopped and said, no, that's what we're going to write. And he's looking at me like, you've got to be kidding. And I explained to him what I wanted to write. And the song we got out of it is probably to this day, in my mind, the best song I've ever written. It's called Wrong Turns, and it's actually going to be the title track of the album we're getting ready to go in and record. And just the amount of stuff that I've seen when I'm on the road, and I've played pretty much every single dive bar and hole in the wall from coast to coast, festivals, all that. And more often than not, you see a lot of people end up, judging a book by its cover. They'll look at somebody or what they do for a living or whatever thing and instantly make assumptions about, who they are and what their motives are and all that. And more often than not, it couldn't be further from the truth. And that's kind of what this song's about. It's called Wrong Turns. It goes like this. I was sitting on a bar stool on a lonely Friday night, and in walked a preacher man trying to do some right. He said, hey bartender, what makes you want to live a life this way, serving up temptation for those who've gone astray. You could hear a pin drop with the barkeep lost in thought, and that old man staggered distant, searching for something he forgot. Then the barkeep leaned in closer, grabbed a glass and cleaned it up, and poured a cold one for the preacher and said, let me tell you what, they can drown their sorrows in the whiskey night after night, but eventually the wrong turns will lead them right. 'Cause this bar's my altar, and the bar stools are my pews. They talk to me, and they're too scared to talk to you. It might seem wrong, but it gets them through another night, and eventually the wrong turns will lead them right. In this bar we sit as equals, I don't judge them wrong or right. As I listen to confessions underneath these neon lights, I can catch them when they stumble and help them speak their minds and get things off their shoulders so they can leave them all behind. Hell, I'm a beacon in their darkness as I try to find the light, and eventually the wrong turns will lead them right. 'Cause this bar's my altar, and the bar stools are my pews. They talk to me, and they're too scared to talk to you. It might seem wrong, but it gets them through another night, and eventually the wrong turns will lead them right. A revelation overcame him, I could see it on his face, and before the preacher left that night, he found the words to say. This bar's your altar, and the bar stools are your pews. If they can't talk to me, I'm glad they can't always talk to you. It might seem wrong, but it gets them through another night, and eventually the wrong turns will lead them right. Yeah, it might seem wrong, but it gets them through another night. And eventually the wrong turns will lead them right.
Beautiful song. That's really a great message. And it kind of ties into what we were chatting about at the beginning, just about how things sometimes don't go always how you anticipate them to go, but eventually it takes you in the right direction. So it's kind of cool that
Absolutely.
that summarizes our conversations for the day.
Sure.
Well, that's great. Well, congratulations on the new single and putting it out to the world. It's a exciting time, I think, for music because things are very different now, and we get to be creative with how we market and push things, and just a whole different way of doing things. So I think it's exciting to be putting out new music in this crazy time.
Absolutely. You know, pandemic or not, I'm still going to keep putting new music out. So
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing all the other fun things that you're recording and releasing throughout the year. I always love to wrap these conversations up with the question, if you had one message to share with the world, what would it be?
do what you love.
Hmm.
You know, I think so many people get caught up in the, you know, you need to pick one thing and that's what you're doing for the rest of your life. You know, a lot of people will go to college, university, look at a diploma or degree in something, and then they feel like, well, this is what I have to do forever. And you know, I think you should do something as long as you love it and it brings you happiness and piques your interest and challenges you. And as soon as it stops doing that, go do something else. You know, like life's too short. You don't got to keep doing the same thing over and over if it doesn't do anything to bring you happiness or anything. And you know, I think if more people were comfortable with the fact of, you know, doing a job for 3-4 years and when they get bored of it, go and do something else, people will be a lot happier.
I agree. I am a big believer in doing what you love and, finding a way to make things happen. If you want to be a painter, find a way to go be a painter. If that's all you want to do, there is a way for you. There's just no limitations. And I think sometimes we put too many roadblocks in front of ourselves and we just get in our own way. So do what you
Agreed.
want. Yeah, that's well said. Well, thank you so much, Ty, for being on the show. It's been great chatting with you and hearing your tunes.
Thank you for having me.
You betcha. I look forward to catching up again soon.
Likewise.